to all of you. If you can go on to mute, everybody, otherwise Graham will mute you.
We can get some feedback,
welcome to everyone. It's always a pleasure to see you, and the Coffee Buddies experience goes from strength to strength. As you know, we're all about community and basically informing, engaging and entertaining, and today it's going to be one of those special entertaining days because we've got a fantastic dialogue going on, and we've picked in particular a topic which I don't know whether everyone feels it's as fascinating as I do, but it's this thing about what is an entrepreneur, what are the ingredients of an entrepreneur, and do ecosystems have an impact on what an entrepreneur is. And I can remember about 20 years ago going to JP Morgan and being in at the time when you could actually get into the Western and be with all the suited individuals listening to public companies, and this young individual turned up with a yoga mat under his arm, and he just wandered in and he wandered around trying to look for a job. And that was my first real experience of what an entrepreneur is, somebody who takes risks, who's different out of the pack, and really has some different ways of thinking. And the entrepreneur of today is an interesting question. And I've got a fabulous group of people. I've got so many good people. I'm not going to introduce them myself, but I'm going to go around and let them introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Chris Lorimer.
If you could start with actually Jennifer from Biocom.
Oh, Jennifer, you're going to say something. Jennifer, welcome to Jennifer.
Thank you.
You do a kickoff.
Good morning, all. Welcome. Jen Landris here. I serve as the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Biocom California. Biocom is the statewide trade association representing the life sciences community throughout the state, but we are headquartered in San Diego with offices in Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and Sacramento. And we have kind of 5 key areas that we focus on, but in particular, capital development, which is a part of why we're participating in this discussion today. And within that initiative, our goal, myself and Oscar, who is on the screen here, is really connecting entrepreneurs and individuals and companies to potential partners, funders, or sources of capital. So we do a lot of matchmaking, large events, small events, et cetera. And we're looking forward to this discussion today. And there's a couple of other San Diego folks that have joined in today. So it should be a good rousing debate and a good discussion. So thank you for having us join you, and we're looking forward to a good conversation.
Thanks, Jen. Lovely to see you. So I'm going to start kicking off by getting a few of the folks to introduce themselves. First of all, Chris Lorimer, young Chris, as I call him.
Young. Carry on, Tony. Well done.
From San Diego. A brilliant young man, I would call him. And he's experienced both London and San Diego. And just maybe you could introduce yourself and say where you are and what you do, Chris.
Morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Lorimer. I'm in the Senior Manager in the Office of Innovation at UC San Diego. And UCSD has been going on a pretty unusual experiment the last 5 or 6 years, trying to radically improve how we did creation of startup companies and moving them out into the innovation space. The last 4 years, my startups alone have raised over 750 million, mostly in venture financing. And before, I spent 5 years at UCL Business PLC in London, where I did a startup company with Tony. And so I have a both sides of the pond perspective. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to move to another part of the world, to an entrepreneur called Murat. Murat, maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to do so. Hi, everyone. My name is Murat. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Antiverse. We are using AI to accelerate antibody drug discovery. We founded the company in 2017 in London. Then we moved to Cambridge and finally in Cardiff. So 4 years later, we are post-revenue, working with some pharma biotech companies, a team of approximately 10, our lab and office space in Cardiff, UK. And yeah, we raised about £2 million to give you a reference.
Fantastic. Lovely to see you, Mira. Now moving to another person from a different part of the life cycle of the entrepreneur. Maybe I could introduce Brian. Brian, maybe you could just introduce yourself and just say something about where you are in the world and how you got there.
Yeah, hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon from San Diego. Brian Cully, I'm the CEO of Lineage Cell Therapeutics. We're a public company that transplants whole cells. We're a cell therapy company. We can manufacture cells to treat blindness, spinal cord cells to treat spinal cord injury and paralysis. We have 3 clinical programs today, and I've been out here in San Diego for 29 years, so I've seen a lot of things change over that period.
Fantastic. Really a great pleasure to have someone with your sort of experience. Now going down to the bottom of the screen, I've got James from London. James, another entrepreneur, and we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. But James, what do you do, man?
Thanks, Tony, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. My name's James. I'm CEO and co-founder of Mum Incubators, or Mum. And we came up with a new way to incubate premature children to try and solve one of the largest killers of children under 5, which is prematurity. So originally I'm a product designer. This was my bachelor degrees project and made it into a company. I guess I'm a bit different because I've lived and worked in both the UK and the States, and our funding also comes about 50-50 from the US to the UK. So we've got an odd mix, I guess. To give some reference, we've raised about 3.5 million so far and about to enter into our clinical trials, which is incredibly exciting, but also quite scary.
Fantastic. And I'm going to get another sort of force of nature almost, which is Nigel, who is, I don't think I would describe you as an entrepreneur, but you're if you like, a facilitator of many entrepreneurs, Nigel. So welcome to Nigel.
Hi everyone. Born and bred in the UK, top class rugby player, a jazz musician. Then I had to travel my way to Boston to discover a new industry called biotech when I was running the trade section at the British Consulate in Boston. Spent 24 years in Boston and then 1 year in San Diego, where I did meet you, Jennifer, at that time. Then came back to run the BIA, which is the national trade body for the biotech industry in the UK, back in 2010. So I've been back in London since then. And I run now an initiative called British Educated Life Scientists. The best way to think of that is a bunch of talented individuals, 3,200 strong at the moment, who have come out of UK universities, mostly Brits, but also people from other nationalities, out of the universities that produce, I think, it hovers around 30 of the top 200 ranked universities in the world are in that little country called Great Britain, which is the size of New England. So an amazing hot spot for innovative things. So we network and bring these people together. We've been doing this for about 20 years. It's all the creme de la creme of the industry now right across the globe in about 43 countries. And they are a formidable force, but the UK has not, unlike other countries like India, Israel, and Ireland, sorry, have not utilized their diaspora. And we're trying to put that right because this talent is interested in what's going on in the UK and would like to help.
So this is another fantastic group. And the last one, I think, Graham, you'll have to remind me, is Jason. And Jason, welcome to Jason. Jason is another what I would call amplifier, because Jason is all about taking many entrepreneurs and throwing them out in all directions. And Jason, maybe you could say hi to the gang.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. So I run StartCode, which is a new accelerator investment arm based in Cambridge in the UK. I'm originally from the States, from Louisiana, so I purposefully chose to pursue my degree and stay in lovely, sunny England. I've been here since 2004. So I'm looking forward to this conversation to talk about how programs like mine that supports therapeutics, diagnostics, medtech, and digital health early stage entrepreneurs, we seed fund them, we help them build their teams and hopefully secure additional financing. I think that there are some really exciting opportunities in the UK that I think can rival what's going on in the States. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Fantastic. So I hope you see we've got a cooking pot of all sorts of people with different sort of opinions. And I'm going to start the conversation by going to James. Now, James.
More.
Sorry?
Oh, there's Maro.
Oh, no, I didn't see you down there.
The other
man.
San Diego
Sorry.
to balance
No,
the.
I thought I was doing so well, and then I got Maro. But Maro, and somebody from Italy, Maro.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Coffee buddies. I'm a neophyte here, and I'm Italian. I grew up in Italy, but I studied all across the world, I would say. Started actually, I spent a year in the UK. It was not maybe the most popular place, is Wolverhampton. And then I went to Germany for a few years, get my PhD, and then I'm in San Diego now for about 15 years. I'm a founder and CEO of Abilita Bio, who's a San Diego biotech startup that was started about 7 years ago. And we enable the discovery of drugs and especially antibodies for difficult membrane proteins like G protein-coupled receptors, ion channels, and transporters. And yeah, I think I said it all as an intro.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maro. And sorry I put you at the end. Let's kick off then with James. And I want to kick off with, you know, there's so many books that you read about entrepreneurs. We're always hearing about entrepreneurs. What the heck is an entrepreneur, and what's it like being a London entrepreneur, James?
I don't know. I hate the word entrepreneur. I think it's an awful
great
word.
start. So, tell us why you hate the word entrepreneur.
Because everyone calls themselves an entrepreneur now. Because it's the, I don't know, it's the cool thing. And I think it's a title that you have to earn personally. And that might just come from my background. I came from an entrepreneurial family. My dad started a business before I was born. I grew up in that, and that meant I had to feel firsthand the struggle he went through, the difficult times, the times I'm sure everyone's faced in this call, you know, where you nearly go bust. But as his son, as growing up in a family kind of unit, and watching him not just struggle for us, but also struggle for everyone that he employed, and really caring for them. And when people use the word entrepreneur just as they want, I think it does a disservice to people like that who really fought. So, for example, I don't consider myself an entrepreneur yet. I haven't done anything yet.
No, it's
I want to be able to earn that in the future.
Well, it's interesting, you know, because if you had a tin shop and you made pots and pans and then you converted it into a ship lamp, you were clearly an entrepreneur. But Chris, what's your take on, you know, the entrepreneur word to start with, really?
You know, Tony, it's funny you mentioned tinsmiths. Everyone's familiar with the California gold rush, but what they don't know is it needed tin miners from Cornwall to bring the technology for gravity-fed mining and extraction to actually unlock the riches. And that's the story of California. So it all comes down to transplants bringing technology from another part of the world to unleash wealth. And I think there's a real message there. And so here at UCSD, we're striving to be amongst the best in terms of new company formation. We think we're first or second ranked in the nation for starting companies on a per year basis. And these are mainly research-derived, technology-focused new companies. And I think most people on this call are familiar with that group. And we're absolutely not looking for entrepreneurs at all. That's a completely different skill set. We're looking for founders and project managers. And normally my first point of call is the doctoral community. It's the PhD candidate or the postdoc who's invented something, frankly, more than the professor who's leading the lab, but we don't talk about that. And they're the key target demographic for going and forming a new startup company and getting running with it. And so it's very much not the entrepreneur we're looking for, not at all.
So you know, let's bring in Murat here. Murat, you're a global citizen, really. I mean, you've looked around the world everywhere. You travelled far and wide. You wandered, and you ended up in Cardiff. My God, that's an amazing experience. So tell us why, and tell us, you know, I love Cardiff, by the way, you know, I love Wales, but then Murat, you ended up in Cardiff. Why? Why did an entrepreneur, and are you an entrepreneur, you head all the way over to Cardiff?
I don't know if I am, but in my first job, I was employee number one in a company, and I've given a piece of paper with 3 circles on it, and they said, go, build this thing, hire a team, make it happen. 12 months later, we had, salespeople, marketing, and it's my first job right out of school. So I was thinking, this is not what I want to do. I want to focus on technology. I don't think I was ready at that time, but there was something magical about it. So I tried it in the past 15 years over and over. I'm from Istanbul, but I moved to Czech Republic, did some stuff there for 6 years, moved to Ireland, and then UK, Germany, and finally, like you say, Cardiff. So the beauty of Cardiff for us was there is so much support that you wouldn't normally notice. There's investment groups out there, there's angel groups that we never heard of before. Now that, my co-founder is also based in Cardiff, which made our life easier. And our main concern, maybe you can come to this at a later stage, but is there enough depth of talent pool if you want to build an AI company in the intersection of biotech, right? And we found out that we actually found amazing candidates. And because we ran the company for some time in London and Cambridge, we were based in Bebraham Research Campus. I can say that also your money goes longer in Cardiff, and that was really, really important for us. So happy to be there.
So you're talking about a runway. So if I bring in Mauro, I mean, Mauro, in your experience I heard that key word, a lot of support, and I think that's the Development Bank of Wales and people like the Development Bank of Wales, which are government systems, really. I mean, Mauro, are you an entrepreneur, and what's your journey been like?
Well, I'm a first timer, and so I hope to be the last timer too, at least, to make a bit successful. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really appreciate when I came to San Diego how, for example, important is the concentration. Something I wanted to, I mean, I'm sure you guys noticed that, as San Diego versus UK, San Diego is a 3.3 million people city versus the UK, which is, 80 something million, is a lot more spread. And I think what I underestimated when I started this is the advantages of having a very high concentration of entrepreneurship, I guess, for first. So I think like what Chris was saying, is San Diego is one of the first cities in the US for starting companies, especially biotech. And also, the presence of big universities, or high quality universities, between the UCSD and the Salk Institute and the Scripps Research Institute and Stanford Bar now SPB or SBP. And so I think this makes kind of a nice cocktail, I think, which is great for biotech. And so I learned on the go. I wasn't really trained as an entrepreneur and a CEO. So and I started a few years ago with going to groups. There's a lot of groups and events, and you can meet CEOs left and right, and even coffee places here are rich with entrepreneurs and CEOs and biotech people. So I think this was really important. There's a very strong infrastructure, and I benefited from it a lot. And also what I wanted to mention is that San Diego, I think, is the place where entrepreneurs stay. They don't just, form a company, make money, and then leave because they can wait to escape the cold, for example. I'm not mentioning UK, I don't know about UK, but Boston, for example, a lot of times you hear people that run away from Boston as soon as they made what they want. I think San Diego is a destination place, and so that makes it even more interesting, I think.
And to just bring in Nigel. I mean, when I hear Mauro and I hear Scripps, I hear that it's a bit like this geography of genius. All the hot brains are there, and it feels so much more powerful than St. Bartholomew's Hospital or St. Thomas's. I mean, is there some magic about these ecosystems, or is it just PR is much stronger? Nigel?
I think the narrative is important, and I think, that's something that I would say as a generality. In the UK, we've got to get better at telling our narrative. We're still very introverted, the way we look at things. We don't look out. There are so many great stories to tell in the UK. When I went to San Diego, spent time there, but equally took groups through there to open people's eyes. I think the thing that struck me particularly about San Diego itself was when you saw Connect and you saw other organizations like that coming through, they were private sector led rather than by the public sector led. And I think too often in the UK, we've focused on waiting for government or government agencies to do things for us rather than the private sector mobilizing itself. And when you think that Connect was not started by any government body, it was started by private business in San Diego and had a tremendous impact on that community. So that's the thing I think, and I see the same when you look at the mobilization of Kendall Square and in Boston as well.
So, I mean, if you look, Jason, I mean, Nigel's got the joy of looking both ways, and you have as well. And Jason, I mean, you again looked around the world, decided you would go to Cambridge. And I mean, is it geography of genius? What is it?
It's a good question. Well, first, I want to say where I'm from back home, being an entrepreneur meant you're unemployed. So it took me a long time to get away from that connotation that it wasn't just something you said when you didn't have a real job. And it took some time to convince my family of that as well. But why did I settle in Cambridge? I never really intended to stay in the UK. When I first received a scholarship to move here to do my PhD, I was told it would be the end of my career ambitions because everybody knows that America's the place to be. People from the UK and abroad are clamoring to get in. Why on earth would you want to go abroad? But what I found in Cambridge was a land of opportunity. It's exciting because there's just so much to play for here. You have the infrastructure, you've got amazing companies that had their start here. The chemistry behind Illumina sequencing began to start here. The Human Genome Project, we see AstraZeneca just moved into the neighborhood. So there's so much to be had in a very permissive, well-funded research ecosystem with access to investors from Europe, from the UK, from Asia, and the States, perfectly positioned in terms of time zone. So I'm on calls morning, noon, and night, but usually because they're easy to make. So I think that it's full of potential. I think increasingly we're seeing investors from abroad wanting to put their capital into companies that grow and scale in the UK. And it's kind of the Wild West because there's so much here to play for without having to worry about the, let's say, maybe overcrowded ecosystems. We're on the uptick. And I think increasingly people will realize that not only are the technologies that are driving many of the mega corporates, pharma, and biotech originated here in the UK and in the Oxbridge and Cambridge areas in particular, but also that those companies increasingly, like the Oxford Nanopores of the world, want to stay here and grow and scale and even go public in the UK markets. So there's a lot more to be seen, and stay tuned. So it's a really exciting place to be.
But I mean, but you started off by saying, you know, being an entrepreneur is unemployed. I presume that comes with poverty or, you know, spending your time not eating well. Is it that good in Cambridge? I mean, if you go there, is it just full of people in Ferraris?
Well, I don't think that a Ferrari is necessarily the sign of success.
Okay, full of people.
There are lots of Teslas.
Now come on. Yeah, so I mean, let's bring in, hang on, George is doing some waves and he's gone, so bye, George. So, I mean, there is a very interesting question. What is success? So let me just throw that
guys, I have to go celebrate, drink a lot of beer, a lot of champagne and make speeches, so.
Okay, don't worry about us.
It was a
It's
cameo.
great to see you again, Tony. Great to see you, Graham. I will join from now on at more time.
Love you.
I see you are as mad as usual, Tony. I love you. Ciao.
Love you. Ciao. So heading back to James, James, I joke about the Ferrari. Well, I don't joke about the Ferrari actually, and maybe George leaving was an example of a Ferrari. But anyway, James, what's this thing about? Is it easy being an entrepreneur in London, or is it a struggle?
I think less people know what one is here than they do in the States, or that was my when I worked over there, that was what I kind of saw. They've got ideas about it a lot of the time. They think about the Steve Jobs movie. However, saying that, the ecosystem, like Jason said, is is getting much more mature quickly. I'd say we're still 15 to 20 years behind the place in the US, and you can see that particularly in our VC ecosystem, and particularly in how people join venture. From my experience, it's mainly been a lot of people in private equity and go into VC funds, and they have a different way of looking at the world. Whereas if you go to the US, it's a mixture of finance people and usually exited founders. Whereas in the US, they're really, well, from my experience, they're pushed to take on risks for bigger opportunities. In the UK, more it's about when's your break-even point, and actually not taking as big of a venture as they would, and maybe that's some of the reason why you get the bigger exits in the US compared to the UK in general.
I mean, bringing Chris back in. I mean, Chris. I mean, there is this. I mean, I'm always intrigued how people fund years of no money. How do you fund years of no money?
Well, they don't.
Yeah,
That's not the situation at all. One of the first thing I say to my founders, particularly like a postdoc, is don't go into debt. It'll cost you a little bit of money, but then after that, there is an entire cascade of non-dilutive funding available to the point where you can then get other venture financing. I wouldn't encourage a postdoc to go and start a company if there wasn't that runway. And I do want to capture a point that Jason made. Doing a startup as a career choice, I don't think it's something that's prevalent in the UK. It absolutely is here, particularly for younger people. It's seen as a valid career choice, and it can go on the resume. And success or not, it adds to the richness of one's career history. And it's worth noting, there are dramatic differences in the US. Somebody getting a PhD is a lot older and probably a lot more in debt than a UK person. You can be 24 years old and you've got your doctorate from some outstanding university and not too much debt. There should be more companies happening. And so it needed to dig into why aren't there? And I would say, the UK being behind the US, I'd actually say specifically 40 years. And there's a very specific reason for that, which people can ask me about. Mauro was talking about the power of clusters. Well, if I went to the Leeds, Sheffield cluster, I think I could find some pretty darn good universities. And also Manchester and Liverpool, my old stomping ground, find some very good universities. And I ask a question, why was Google not formed in Manchester?
Well, this thing, Chris, and I'm going to bring in Murat now. And Jen maybe can comment on this as well. I mean, this idea of Chris used a key word. He said there's this cascade. I love that word, a cascade. And a cascade by definition is not just a little bit here and then you're in the wilderness for years. It's a cascade of, it's a pipeline really. You've got a pipeline to support you. I mean, do you feel that that's what you've got in Cardiff, Murat?
Maybe for the early stages, yes, right? When you look at, if you want to build a biotech company, I don't have too much information about US, but I can speak for some other countries in the Europe. UK is the place to be, right? For sure. So many accelerator incubator programs, other programs like Jason, Start Code On. This is definitely the place to start a biotech company because you have, right, pre-seed funding, like angel funding, pre-seed funding, seed funding, all the way there. What I find difficult is the step after that. You don't see too many AI companies in the biotech space getting next stage of funding. And maybe that's not the fault of the environment, but there are not too many good examples that you can point and make a case. And we have to change that.
And this is this very, it's so boring, we don't want to talk about it anymore, but this is this dreaded hole in financing that is universally talked about in the UK. So it's never viewed as a cascade, it's viewed as boluses. So, I mean, Jen, do you see that in your membership, is there abundant support for people? And, is it like Chris says that there's so much support that you can be a hard up person and still be an entrepreneur?
I think Well, different ways that you can look at it. And I think certainly geography plays a big part into it, because in San Diego, as Chris was saying, I mean, it's a very collaborative, connected, intertwined, positive or negative, everybody's up everybody's business and kind of knows what's going on and who the key players are. And you're within X degree of separation from somebody that can get you to a source of funding. But I think as you go back to the question about what's an entrepreneur, it's also looking at some of their other skills, their passion. Does it come through the salesmanship, the ability to build your networks? And I think you can have a great idea, but it's also those other elements to get it along and get it moving that I think play into it. And I think as you're looking at funding, you talk to the VCs and the partners, and they'll tell you good ideas will get funded and good ideas will find partners, and the money is there. But then you talk to some of the entrepreneurs who have the good ideas, and there is a little bit of that disconnect, but I think it's just finding the right bridge and finding the right angle to get in front of the right people. And it's,
but there is this thing about, I hear that so frequently, that good ideas get funding. And, then I'm thinking to myself, well, there's a lot of bad ideas. I mean, most of the companies I've worked in, it's been most of it's been a disaster, but the difference is we've had capital to get us out of the disaster. There's been experiments that just don't work. It just doesn't work. And do not tell me, because I've done it hundreds of times myself. It just.
But in those companies, the person getting the funding, was it based on the technology, or was it based on their salesmanship and passion and how they presented? I just think it's interesting.
But that's the gamish, isn't it, that we're talking about? Bring in Jason. I mean, this is this thing about, where do good ideas always get funded? And my question to you, see, I always had that question that I'll ask you again, Jason, is idea more important than capital? Because with capital, I can do anything. I can buy ideas. I can get more ideas than you'll ever have. But with an idea, I've got to find capital. I've got to find, it's like a smart bomb. I have to go around the world until I smack into the right investor, because that's what it's all about. Jason.
So there are a couple of things to unpick there, Tony. So one I would say is that I'm going to make a gross generalization, but I think if you look at front versus substance, there are a lot of companies in the US that have a great front. They can pitch, they've got great storytellers, they give you confidence, and there's no substance. But people will give them the money because they figure out they'll get on with it and they'll sort themselves out. And then what they do is they say, I've just raised 80 mil, I'm 22 years old, I've never done this before, but people like me. What do I do next? I know, let me go look at the UK and see if I can gobble up any small startups that have some interesting technology that can drive and justify the 80 million that I just raised from a group of angels and investors on the West or East Coast. And I've seen this happen so many times. And even when I was running my previous company, I experienced it myself, that I'm thinking, here I am going out for, let's say, a 10 million Series A. In the UK, you get investors who go, don't you want to raise 5? Isn't 10 a bit ambitious? And then you go to the States and they go, why aren't you raising 100? So it's kind of the attitude of or the quanta you raise and just how aggressive people want to be. But fundamentally, there are a lot of UK startups and technologies that are fueling these amazing corporates. So we don't see that Google is running AI that they acquired from DeepMind that was founded in London. We don't see that Illumina, although they're losing some market share now, because of Grail, let's not mention that, they're running off of chemistry invented in Cambridge by Solexa that they acquired for 600 mil a few years ago, and now they're worth over 35 billion, and they dominate the sequencing market. So there are plenty of stories like that, and to Murat's point, I think what's really happening is you have to match the ambition with the ecosystem and the people who have the experience to bring it off. And too often here, just to try to bring a point to real quickly, too often we find in the UK that there's the substance, but people don't know how to pitch. Maybe it's because people are humble or self-deprecating.
They know how to pitch. I think they know how to pitch, but there's some magic that is missing, because for a long time people would say to me, Tony, you need to be more ambitious. And I'd think, right, I'm going to go and be ambitious. So I'd go into a VC and I'd say, well, boys, I need 100 million. And they'd laugh. They'd just laugh. I'd done my ambitious bit and it didn't work because they just laughed. Now, Mauro, is what the trick is really, we need the San Diego ecosystem to work in close proximity, the UK system, because the combination is awesome. Is that what we're saying? Because there's the cash and the ideas. But Mauro, thoughts?
Yeah, I actually like to expand on what I said before. And so I think the cluster of universities is important, but I think the cluster of entrepreneurs and money is also important. So I think what happens when you're next, door to door with somebody that has done it before. I think, for example, older entrepreneurs with more experience, you find yourself in the same association, you talk. I think at the end of the day, I'm a first-time entrepreneur. So when I go out, I can be, I can pitch the beautiful story. I can be as aggressive as I can. But it's going to be very tough for VCs, even if they have a bit more money maybe here than somewhere else, to give you money. So I think what you really need is the interpersonal relationship with somebody that's done it before. So for example, if I associate myself with somebody which is more famous than me, which has a track record of successes in the past, I think I got a much better chance to get more money. And I think I also wanted to add that one of the differences, I lived in England, I lived in Italy, and something that was shocked, especially here in San Diego, I think, is the concept of the American dream. Here people, as I said before, let's say people are very successful, they don't leave, they stay, and then they hang around. And when they see that there's somebody else younger with a good idea, they have this concept of giving, helping the new people and helping them be successful. Maybe they're gonna, just by networking, I'm gonna introduce you to this friend, and then this friend is going to introduce another friend. And I think that was very helpful for me, at least in this case. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that have a lot of money that want to invest in you, maybe only $500,000 or $1 million, and you find I think hundreds of these opportunities here in San Diego of old entrepreneurs that believe in you, believe in your idea, and want to give you a chance.
So let's go. I'm going to head towards Nigel, but I'm going to go through Jason. I mean, Jason, is that?
And then Brian, I would say.
Sorry?
And then maybe Brian after that.
I need to bring Brian in as well, because that's the other end of the market, really. But I'm going to come to that. But Jason, just this thing about, are there abundant, I don't know, successful? I mean, there used to be like Herman Hauser. There were the Cambridge Angels, but they were quite a tight group of people. So, I mean, are you managing to bump into a load of people who've made money who are helping you, like Mauro says happens in San Diego? Do you get that in Cambridge and in the UK?
Definitely. And the great thing is that Cambridge is only 120,000 people. So you literally bump into everybody. I mean, during COVID, you go walking along the river because there's nothing else to do. I saw numerous business angels walking about, and you have a conversation. Herman and Amadeus Capital just invested in one of my companies last week, actually. So there are plenty of angels. Now, San Diego is a much more mature ecosystem. So obviously you probably have the volume there, but people in Cambridge, and I think the UK as a whole, they're very willing to give you their time. And what we're finding—
what ticket size do these people, as you're wandering down the Cambridge, getting on their boats, not their boats, their punts, what ticket size are you talking about for these people?
I mean, it depends. It could be 50K, it could be up to 500K, maybe a bit more.
50K and 500K, are we talking about, I'll bring in Brian now, are we talking about a different order of magnitude that you bump into San Diego pub or whatever it is, and you meet people who when you talk about a ticket, it's millions? Brian, where's Brian?
Yeah, hi, Tony. So my thoughts, to start at the top there with one of the things that surprisingly hasn't come up in the discussion of entrepreneurship is risk, right? That four-letter word, to my mind, that's really more than anything else what defines an entrepreneur. If you have a massive safety net, I have a huge safety net, right? We've got a lot of money in the bank. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have enough risk, right? I'm a developer. I'm moving technologies around, and I kind of was anchoring on something that Jason said, because when we think about entrepreneurship and we think about how we measure this, there's a difference clearly between the folks who invent the technology and the folks who advance or develop the technology. Who deserves the credit? I don't have an answer to that, but who ends up getting the credit when something is invented in one place and developed somewhere else? Who's the real entrepreneur there? Again, these are just provocative questions. I don't have particular perspectives one way or another. But I think that we tend to define entrepreneurship around the idea. We talk about, good ideas get funded, but we've all heard the phrase, bet the jockey, not the horse, because good people can somehow find a way. Again, Jason, you've had so many smart things to say today, but good people find a way to get funding even with bad ideas, even if it's kind of, smoke and mirrors and I'll figure it out later. Now, obviously in excess, that becomes a problem legally, but as a business concept of, I'm just going to be determined to figure out how I get it done, it has proven to be very effective in many cases. But we also have a lot of people who run around as bona fide entrepreneurs with a lot of risk and unprotected and trying very hard, but they may not have the ability to get it done even with a really great idea. Entrepreneurship is a special thing. You have to pull in so many resources.
But this is, I think, when I was a corporate VC, and it was a bit like every technology was 5 to 10% delta. There were so many good things out there. How many targets, what target do you want for oncology? I could find it. And the reason what you went for a target or not was actually I think Jen said it, the passion of the entrepreneur, but also this thing about I liked him. I really like this guy or girl, and that's what actually differentiated it. So is there something, Chris, that we can learn? Do the San Diego crowd and the ecosystem breed that more?
Well, I'd say from the perspective of UCSD, we view it as shots on goal, because at the local level, an individual corporate VC might say, boy, I really like that target. That's great. Somebody else is going to say that target's rubbish. We've seen it. We're not interested. And so we want to give everybody the chance to give it a go and try and get the technology out there, get it moving, and then let the marketplace figure it out. But there's an important point here, which is today's founder becomes the board advisor for tomorrow, the chair of the board, in future years, and then ultimately we hope the angel investor who recapitulates the cycle, just as somebody mentioned earlier, and that's so important. So yeah, shots on goal is the big thing, and let the market figure it out.
Yeah, and so Mira, going around to Mira, have you got are those ingredients there? There's big, good ticket size from an angel. I don't know what ticket size you're talking about when you go down one of the Cardiff rivers. I don't know what the names are really, but there must be a Cardiff river with a boat on it. What ticket size are they interested in? Tell us, are they a 50,000 or are they a 10 millionaire? Because I get the feeling that there's a lot more 10 millionaires in the US.
Yeah, that's our experience as well. When you talk about angels, definitely it's not on the millions level. In our last round and the round before, we had angels both from Cambridge and Cardiff. And I would say the ticket size, ours is it may not be the best example, but the ticket sizes varies around maybe 10K to 100K.
So, Mauro, is that what you see in the States, or?
Maybe a little higher, but I'm a special example because I'm a first timer. So my checks were between 20 and 100 too. But I think if I look around at my friends, they definitely get more.
And Jen, would you say that the ticket size is much more in your experience?
Yes, I would. You're certainly seeing, and I think as you get a handful that get these larger numbers, it sets expectations that you have to get larger to, it equates to your sort of success. It's creating these false measures, I think. But yes, we definitely see larger ticket sizes.
Say a little bit more about what you were just saying. Can you explain it a bit more?
Just perspective, right? But as you look at these A rounds that are getting larger and larger and larger, do you really need that much? And is it just the fact that you can raise that much? And then how are you putting that to work? But then it sort of sets this expectation that if you got like 3 years ago, a normal A, but now you're getting these, you know, significantly larger rounds. Are you still as successful? Yeah, I'm probably not articulating that.
No, I think you are. I mean, in the UK, we were trained, well, I was trained that, you know, it's a bit like a menu in a restaurant. You get 10 million, and out of 10 million, you get a phase one. And you couldn't ask, if you can't show that you're going to do more than three phase ones, you couldn't get more than 30 million. It's quite straightforward. Whereas there is a sense that these companies have either got a huge amount in the bank and they've got a runway that lasts 20 years, or that they can buy a large infrastructure, which again, working in big pharma like I did for years, I was always trying to remove. I was always trying to get rid of the infrastructure because that was a desperate cost base. But let me just throw in James here into your mind. What's your thoughts on what we've been saying?
Oh, so much. But you know what Jason's saying about Cambridge and there's parts of London. There are pockets in the UK which feel more like the US ecosystem, but to get those bigger ticket sizes, I found you've got to kind of work through more layers of people to get to the ones who can really put in the hundreds, the 250s, the 500s.
Where's
they are there.
Where are the pockets, James?
That's good. You know the old adage of an old boys club, kind of why America exists in the first place. I think that's still a thing, you know, and you've got to talk to the right people and be able to work your way in there. And that's, I guess, something a bit different about entrepreneurship in the UK. You kind of got to have that ability. Whereas in the US, I felt it's easier to meet people that are instantly, okay, we're going to help you out, like Mara said, and get you to the next stage.
But this idea of, you use the term boys club, Jason, I mean, is there an old boys club? And that's one of the differences. You've got open sourcing of cash, and one you've got a hurdle, which is that you have to find it and penetrate it.
Yeah, you know, I think there is still a bit of an old boys club, to be honest. I think particularly classism is alive and well, and you've got to be in the right place at the right dinner and know the right person. It's kind of maintained, but at the same time, I fought my way into the club, and I'm trying to keep the door open for other people. So there are those of us out there who are trying to shake things up, and I think it's changing.
100%. Sorry, I completely agree with that as well.
No, this is very interesting. Where's Brian? Brian, I mean, you in the public markets, because you're in the public markets. I mean, is it, you know, is there anything to learn from the public markets for the entrepreneurs? Are there a lot of people, because in the UK, there's a lot of people who invest in small cap. I mean, what's happening in the States in the public sector?
Well, I think it's
Brian? Yeah. You've frozen a bit. I think Brian's frozen. Just at the key part, he's frozen. Brian, are you back? No. Let's go. Let's ask another question. I mean, Chris, what does any of this resonate with you, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big difference in certainly San Diego is that if people identify that there's an old boys club and they realize they're neither old nor a boy, then they'll set up their own community. They'll just go and do it. And I would refer you to Hera Labs here, which is a community of women founders and entrepreneurs. And that's a nucleus that can bring in a high net worth individuals to then invest in that next generation of companies. They just step up and do it. And that is, I think, a unique difference. But it's worth noting the UK is absolutely dreadful for this old boys club. And, oh, did you go to, you know, private school and Eton and Oxford and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's incredibly inefficient. And it's also full of ignorance. These people generally don't know what they're doing. And it's a poor use of capital. It irritates me.
But Chris, Nigel, I mean, you've seen lots of stuff, and I was really interested in what Jen was saying about this, you know, this ecosystem where you can raise a huge amount of money, and almost to the extent you can't work out what you're going to spend it on. Nigel, what, you know, but of course it will work, because if you've got the cash, you can get yourself another few antibody tests. You know, it's quite straightforward, isn't it? But so Nigel, what's your thoughts?
Well, I guess I come in, going back to this whole entrepreneurship. I mean, I sympathize with James not thinking he's an entrepreneur. I do think it's an overused term that people use. I mean, I guess an entrepreneur is about risk. I was glad that Brian brought that up. And I guess, when you look at what we're trying to do with Bells, I mean, I would consider myself probably a social entrepreneur. Massively underfunded in terms of what we could do, in terms of the impact of what we can do, but knowing that I've got a community that can really positively impact the UK. And I guess what we still have, I mean, we talk about the old boy network, the traditional way of viewing things. Jason is absolutely right that things are changing, but there's a lot of things that still haven't changed. And that old boys network this is the way it's always been done. And it does hold back the UK. When you look at the people in our community, these are all people that should be connected into the UK, should be making investments decisions that impact the UK, but there's got to be a welcome mat, much more to these people. Historically, these people have been forgotten. They've left, they've gone away, out of sight, out of mind, which is absolutely stupid. I mentioned earlier about India, Ireland, and Israel being the absolute brilliant purveyors of actually utilizing their diaspora. The impacts that can be had on an economy, on a nation, are enormous. The UK has so much talent abroad, not just in life sciences, but in all sorts of other areas as well, that comfortably it's 5 or 6 million people that are well disposed to the UK. They've been through a UK education, a lot of my generation for free. There's a feeling of wishing to give back, and we're not tapping into that. It's pretty silly, really.
Yeah. Now, I'm mindful of time, Graham. It's coming up to the hour, and I'd like to get some questions in from the audience. Have you been curating our questions?
Yes, we've got some people that have comments and questions.
Maybe you could guide us through some questions from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we've got Ying Hong. Would you like to start off?
Yes, thank you. I work with in the Biocom in San Diego, and so great to have the opportunity to hear everyone's perspective. And so first of all, Viva Biotech, we are quite global. We invest in emerging startup companies in therapeutics areas. So we have about 60 portfolio companies in our portfolio, and I would say about 60% in the US, about 20% in China, and another 20% is all around the world. And so we have companies in Geneva, in Toronto, and I have to say, we so far have invested in one company in UK, and I am still trying to find more opportunities. And I have talked to associations and try to connect with the biotech hubs in Europe, and some of the places are more successful than the others. So I think I am still trying to connect with something like a Biocom in UK. And so it's interesting to hear about the business models, the check size. And I have to say that from a startup perspective, the check size, usually it has to be justified, right? Depending on what you're doing, because we have companies that have too much money on the table they didn't want to take. Like sometimes they were oversubscribed, and it's about the valuation and how do you raise the next fund. And in Europe, I found that some companies that countries like Denmark, they have very good business model. The countries have Denmark Growth Fund, Innovation Fund, and those are in the $3 million range. And I think those are, I found that a couple of $1 million probably is a good range for a startup company for in the therapeutic area. And so obviously you will start with the angels and things like that. And then universities or pharma innovations funds or farmer ventures. Those are another places because we sometimes co-invest with some of these farmer venture funds as well.
There's a couple of things there. I think one, it's a tragedy if you can't connect with any ecosystem. Come to us, we will connect you to anyone. I mean, that's just a tragedy. I think the other thing is that I think there's a lot of need to somehow work out what it is that makes some of these companies oversubscribed, and whereas there's a lot of people who are desperate for money. And I think that there is something about a gravitas of a group of when something starts to smell good, everybody wants to put the money on the table, but there's a lot of people who don't get it. But let's move on to the questions. Graham,
Jeff Trackett.
Jeff, we know Jeff. Where's Jeff?
Thanks guys, thanks for the very spirited discussion. Enjoyed that, and nice to see familiar names and faces. It was more of a comment really, I guess, as a British person who made the move from the UK to San Diego. I think I'm about 10 years behind Chris actually, so it was great to hear his comments as well. But I think there's a few aspects, comparing the two. Firstly, I think it's cultural, and again, just commenting on my sort of experience, I think there's just that sort of typical sort of British, slightly self-deprecating sort of culture that we have, and I think just Americans, just the way they're brought up, they just have that sort of they sort of advertise things better. So I think there's an aspect to that. I think so that's the first point. The second point I would add is that again, perhaps stating the obvious, but the US just does things on a completely different scale, and I think that was very much part of my decision to move from the UK to the US. But just to give you an example, simple example, again from my UCL business days as well, because I used to work there. The UCL going back 15 years, and bear in mind it's just one institute, they had a patent budget of about £2 million, and you compare that to the NIH patent budget, which I realise that's the whole of the US, but that was 34 billion. So 34 billion versus 2 million, and that just gives you a feel for the difference in sort of like economy. I mean, the state of California has actually, I think, looking on the latest numbers, a GDP greater than the UK. It was always sort of similar. So I think just a few initial sort of like observations and comments I wanted to share with the group.
But so I think that's really good, and I still go back to my conclusion. There's somehow the synergy between the capital in San Diego and some of the people in the UK. But let's get the next question, Graham.
Yeah, Jeanette.
Where's Jeanette?
Hi, Jeanette. You're on mute, by the way. I think you know that. There you go.
Hi. Yeah, I was just interested, James, having raised 50-50 UK and US, very interested to hear how those conversations went, the differences between the US and the UK investors. Were the terms different? Was there a lot of negotiation or difference in style and approach?
Yeah, quite, especially in the early stages, in terms of style, I found okay, I'll start this by saying I'm quite lucky because we're involved with quite a few of the Cambridge lot and some of the good London lot who do take a better, who take a more of a US style of approach to this. But I've got a lot of friends who've done a lot of other companies, and they say that whereas where they approach US investors, I think someone said this before, they'll say, okay, if we give you twice as much, can you grow twice as fast? Whereas a lot of the UK investors will say, right, if we give you half as much, can you do the same amount? And it's just that kind of mentality that people are working with. In terms of early stage as well, in the UK, the good thing about the UK is starting up a company here is it's good in terms of the seed stage funding, because there's so many good tax incentives, SEIS, EIS. So in the UK, you get a lot more people pushing for ordinary shares, equity, valuation rounds, where in the US, I found you get a lot more people pushing for convertible safes. They don't want to put a value on the company. They're saying, here's some money, get going, we'll let a VC do that later. And that can cause can cause tensions because, you know, a lot of people are saying you're early, we don't know how to value you, how you
there
use
is
money
this,
on.
there is this term that, I mean, I met a film producer a few years ago who kept talking to me about failing forward, and I know Michael from Sweden on the line, we've talked a lot about this, but this concept that you put the cash in, like in the film industry, and if it's a flop, you just do the next one. And that seems to be an attitude, James, that the US have that we don't. Is that true?
There's this weird thing that I listened into when I was at, you know, one of these dinners where people are chinking really cheap glass of Prosecco, and there are these people bragging about what investments they didn't make in parts of the UK rather than what they did. And that frustrated me so much. I was like, come on.
In what way? Just tell us a little bit more. I can't get that.
They were talking about how they're glad they didn't invest in that company because it went, and they were bragging that they didn't take that risk or that opportunity. Where in the US or those kind of thinking ecosystems, they'll say, hey, you know, may invest in this great founder, love to see what he does in the future, and we can potentially continue supporting him or her.
But that's really professional investing, isn't it? Rather than investing out your own bank balance.
No, it was startup investments as well. You know, there's this. It's really hard to explain.
Well, let's give you a chance to think about it, and let's get another question, Graham.
Can I follow up? Can I just ask him about how we managed to coalesce that deal then with completely different mindsets, really, and to pull that deal to raise your 3 million that you raised? Was that really tough?
You just have to herd a lot of cats, and some people want different things, some people want others. So we've got a mixture of convertible notes and equity financing in our rounds at the moment, and they're set up so it's fair and equitable for everybody. There are things you can do, and we're lucky that it's worked out really well for us. I've seen it gone the other way as well, where people are asking for their EIS funding and they don't want ASAs, and the US are asking for SAs convertibles, and you know there's a thing about if they're putting in the US as well, higher risk, higher reward. In the UK, you're kind of like trying to lower your risk profile, conserve your equity, all those kind of things. In some places,
which is very interesting. Graham,
I'm making the UK sound terrible. I'm sorry, guys. It's really not. It's great because you've got people like Jason.
It's also James has a great product because he's got a physical product which is sitting behind him, which we haven't got time enough to look at. But I mean, you know, that's a physical product. There is what many of us are interested in therapeutics, which I think there is a difference between investing in a physical product and therapeutics and the life cycle, which is much longer in therapeutics. But Graham, let's go back to the question.
Iram, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thanks for taking the question. For those that haven't met me, my name's Aram, and I work with universities and early stage companies here. But I actually had a question which came out of a conversation I had with a friend and ex-colleague who works for a VC firm based in San Francisco. And that firm had done an analysis where they looked at a number of the companies, therapeutics and vaccines companies that had successfully raised late stage capital. And they found that that group was enriched for companies grown out of VC studios. And that seemed to be more of a trend in the US. So I just wanted to ask if anyone knows about that trend or whether they see the same thing going on in the UK.
Chris, have you seen it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about VC studios. Specifically, we have a couple that I'm aware of in San Diego. But just to expand a little bit, what we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years is people have continued to add new resources into the community. And every time they're launching a new incubator or accelerator or some other kind of combo or novel, whatever, you'll hear some people say, oh, it's never going to work. It's just going to cannibalize the community. And what's turned out is that's simply not true. As you add more resources into your innovation economy, it grows to meet the capacity, which is kind of exciting when you think about it. The more you add, the more it grows. And so it's been very successful. What we see is people hop from place to place to place. And it's exactly what Murat was talking about. You may start out close to a very prestigious university, but then at some point you may move to perhaps a lower cost location like Cardiff in Wales. Got a brilliant university there, and it's right for that part of the life cycle. I think looking at the UK, there's an opportunity. Nobody's going to mind going from Oxford to Leeds to Cardiff. That's all fine. So it's about adding extra resources. It should get utilized.
Okay, let's take another question, Graham.
I mean, Nicholas Moore, you've got a quick comment, don't you?
Yeah, in fact, a couple of comments. I've enjoyed the conversations, and particularly around entrepreneurs. And one thing that struck me, having spent 12 years in the States, or two things. First of all, was the one, invariably when you bumped into somebody in the States and said, you know, how's your day going? They'd reply, awesome. You know, they were really enthusiastic. You have the same conversation in England and it's, oh, not too bad, could be worse. And I think, you know, who would you invest your money with? The guy who's, you know, comes from Yorkshire and is pessimistic, or somebody from sunny San Diego?
Don't say that.
The world is awesome.
Yeah.
But also when it comes to entrepreneurs, I actually think they're born, not created later in life. If I look at the schooling my daughter's had in Bethlehem in upstate New York, you could spot the entrepreneurs in kindergarten.
Yeah,
you know,
but
they were already on their deal, wheeler and dealing. They had the lemonade stands.
But
they had little businesses that they did. Over here, that doesn't happen in the same way.
There is a, you know, we've had a couple of investor events, and some investors don't even want an entrepreneur. They just want a group of people who can take their ideas, the VC ideas, and enable them. I mean, I'm here seeing a nodding from Jen. I mean, do you see that as a very big part of what's going on in San Diego, Jen?
I think that's a part of it. And I think you see, you know, we've had this discussion amongst our CapDev group just last week about creating sort of this founders entrepreneurs group, because people want to be able to just talk through ideas and things like that. And they want to be able to move their product along, but they don't want a ton of different opinions. They want sort of that controlled environment where they can have these conversations and get from point A to point B, but without having to rely on their investors to move them along. So, you know, I think there's a mix.
I mean, we've also had investor conferences where investors have said quite categorically they want the entrepreneur to be rich, to have money behind them. Do you remember that, Graham? And it's like, so there's something about not every investor is the same. There are stratifications of the investors as well as the ticket size that the US has. But then, Graham, another question.
We're just going to round it off with Padmini. You've got a question, don't you, about investing and moving into different regions? Are you there, Padmini?
Yeah, thank you, Graham. I have quite a bit like putting my nose to the grindstone and working through it. So I have like about 5-6 different things I'm working on, and my daughter tells me don't go out and tell people that you're doing this because people will think that it doesn't work. So just work on one thing. But the way I thought it out was that one of my things start paying off my next venture. And I do have a lot of things in the mix that I'm approaching different markets. Like I want to know how to get through the churches. I want to know how to get through different markets. And it seems ridiculous to get funding for something like sales, you know, like increasing your sales channels. So it's not just about inventing or developing your product, but I think I see things from the end first. Like when I was in school, my aunt told me, oh, you got to get good grades because you want to get into medical. It's like, why didn't you tell me that before? Yeah, now I can get good grades.
I wish I'd met.
So I look at the market. So I'm trying to get into different markets because I have a children's product, and I'm trying to understand how do I get across, because when I get out, 5 recruiters try to hire me. So I'm like telling them, like, you see me as an employee, but I have a company, you know, why don't you just
Well,
give
I
me the
think,
contract.
I think
So
Padmina,
it's
I
like
think,
having those conversations. So
yeah.
I have a lot of questions. So
Well,
that what
we can do
well,
that
Jen
in the
said makes
breakout
sense to
session,
me.
can't we?
we'll take those offline, because I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to say it, it's 16 minutes past, because we're going to go into breakouts. Firstly, in case anyone goes, I want to thank, in a big traditional way, all of our contributors. I can't name them all because I'll forget people, but I think there's some super duper stuff here, and I'm sure all of them would, you know, we've heard about connections, we've heard about, you know, 2 degrees of separation. We might not be in any country. We can do it in the cloud, and we are doing it in the cloud. So we can help people. And thank you to Jen in particular for bringing your audience. And I'd love to do it again and pick off another hot topic. But Graham, what are we going to do next?
Yeah, we're going to think about some breakout rooms, aren't we? So we're going to get up close and personal with each other. So I'm going to put you into rooms of 5, and then, you know, we'll put you in there for about 15 minutes. We're going to do 3 rounds. It's going to be about 12 minutes each. It goes really quickly, so get to know each other, and good luck. So here we go. I'm going to open the rooms now. If you just accept that room. If for any reason I move you very quickly, that's just because it balances things out. So don't worry about that.